You're listening to the Iterators of the Imperium.
Hi, I'm Mess, and I'm here with my co-host Ryan, and you're listening to Season 2 of the Iterators of the Imperium podcast, the podcast in which Ryan is the expert on Warhammer 40K, and I'm the noob trying to learn about the Warhammer universe. But before we get into it, we do have a Patreon you guys can check out if you want to support the podcast. We also have a Discord where you guys can get in touch with us and have fun with our Warhammer community. But yeah, let's get into it. So Ryan, what is today's topic?
Mess. Right, we're going to do the usual here. We've got a thing going this season. We're going with quotes, so we're going to keep rolling with it, right?
Yes, now, I'm ready.
I'm going to tell you now, this is a tricky one.
Oh no.
Right, I don't see you getting this one because we haven't talked about this group very much, right?
Oh.
But I'm prepared to give you hints, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this initial reading of this is slightly paraphrased because otherwise it gives it away. But it's close enough, so you'll be fine, right?
Okay.
Nah, as soon as you're old enough, you're sent to join the regiment. Colonel Straggler don't approve of educated men. Says it was educated men that got us bombed to shit in the first place. Colonel says that all a man needs to do is fight and die.
Okay.
It's a good quote.
I'm gonna need some help.
Right. What are your immediate thoughts?
I don't think I've ever been this lost.
Yeah, it sounds quite generic.
It sounds very generic. Like anybody could have said. No, not anybody, obviously, but you know, it sounds like something that a lot of people could have said.
Yeah. Right. I'll tell you right now. It is one of the factions within the Imperium of Man.
Okay.
Right. It is absolutely humanity in one of their factions.
I really want to get a guess, but I don't want to anyways. Because I just don't know.
Yeah, it's quite a vague one, unfortunately. Would you like me to? Actually, I don't think you would get this regardless, but I can tell you the groups of humanity that we still have left for this season, if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, go on.
So there are 3 factions that come under the Imperium of Man banner that we are going to talk about this season, right? And this is in no order. These are scattered quite heavily. But we have Astra Militarum, straight up, just normal guardsmen. We have the Kriegsmen, which are a separate faction of guardsmen. And we have the Sisters of Battle.
I like the Sisters of Battle. That's the sidebar. I don't think it's them, by the way.
It would be a lot more holy and religious-y if it was.
Yeah, it would. I'm still kind of lost.
Alright, I'm going to put you out your misery. Today, we are talking about the Death Korps of Krieg. We are talking about the Kriegsmen.
Right. I was just about to say that.
We did mention these guys in the first episode when we were going over stuff generally, but not in any great detail, right? But I did tell you about these guys because there's a couple of special brands of the Imperial Guardsmen, right? And so you've got like the Catachans, which are, every one of them is like Rambo, right? Doesn't matter if you're man, woman, or child, you're just man, woman, or child Rambo, right? They're all tanks, they're all like just absolute units, right? But they're still human guardsmen. They're just better, right? The Kriegsmen are another one of these. They're another one of these like side sections of just the straight up Imperial Guard. So they are set in the same way as the typical cannon fodder soldiers would be into war zones. But they specialize in hazardous environments. Right?
Oh, wait, hold on. Now it comes back to me. I think it comes back to me.
Yeah.
You showed me some pictures as well in the this is in the very first episode.
Yeah,
right?
I love these guys. So I think when we started talking about this the first time, I was probably quite excited going over these guys. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and the pictures that I saw, it reminded me of like World War II with like, if it was like...
They are based off of World War I Germany.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
so yeah, that's why they wear the great coats and stuff like that.
Yeah, the masks.
Yeah. So actually, do you want to hear the proper version of that quote? Because there's a slight difference to it, and I have who it's attributed to, which makes it even funnier.
Go on.
So the actual quote is, "Nah, Soon as you're old enough, you're sent to join the regiments. Colonel Straggler don't approve of educated men. Says it was educated men that got Krieg bombed to shit in the first place. Colonel says all a man needs to do is fight and die. That's the Krieg way. And it's attributed to an unnamed Death Korps soldier explaining his illiteracy.
Okay.
Which I found funny.
Yeah.
So if we're going to
Wait,
dive
what was this guy's called again?
What?
What was it called again? What would it called again? Because I'm just going to remember it as like the World War One guys.
Yeah. The Death Korps of Krieg. Or
The
Kriegsmen.
Death Korps. Aha.
Yeah. Because the planet that they come from is Krieg, just so you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, right, let's start digging into this a bit. So we are, as we have been doing, going to go with the origins, because it's always interesting. So our story starts on a hive world called Krieg, as you might have guessed. So Krieg sits within Segmentum Tempestus, which is a section of the galaxy which is to the galactic south of Terra, right?
Yeah.
So it's not particularly far away, to be honest with you, but it sits in a section south of Terra. And Krieg was a planet of billions, right? Similar to Earth, as is now, right? There were billions of people on this planet, and it was ruled by a council of autocrats. Do you know what autocrats are?
No.
An autocracy is when you have a government that one person or a small group of people or whatever, some subsection of governance is people with absolute authority over everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like dictatorship, but a little less of one person in charge, I guess, sometimes. Sometimes it is just one dude or one person, but yeah, it's not quite as, I don't know, it seems less harsh than than a dictatorship somehow.
It's a group of dictators.
Possibly. It can be one guy. You can have one autocrat. But yeah, in this case, it was a council. So there was a squad of them.
Yeah, I feel like, because I know what it is, this is one of them times where I should remember, I just mentioned that English is not my native language, so some words are still...
I'll be honest with you, I had a good idea of what autocrat meant, and I was like, I should confirm that, and I did. So even I was curious on this one, so don't worry about it. It's not a very common word. How often do you talk about autocracies?
Oh, every day.
I don't spend a lot of my time discussing governmental procedure, so...
I do.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It was also the planet was also like a trade and manufacturing hub. So they had like massive factories and everything, and they were really prosperous because they were able to, manufacture and trade really easily, which is good. So the planet was doing well for itself, and then the Council of Autocrats started to become quite paranoid that they were going to be attacked, that someone like orcs or something were just going to turn up and bomb the crap out of the planet. So they started sinking their wealth and their resources into building defenses. So around all the hive cities, they started building loads of defenses, and then they started building like orbital defenses as well, and they built like a private army as well. So they weren't like, because every planet in the Imperium, to some degree, has to provide a tithe of troops, right? So for a planet about the size and kind of scale of Krieg, they would be expected to provide one regiment of troops to the guard every decade, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a huge amount when you think of the scale of the planet, right? But that's what they're expected from the people that govern that on Terra, right? The Departmental Munitorum is the group that handles that stuff. They'll put out an order for a tithe from planets and be like, right, we expect troops, come on, hurry up. And then the planet will provide the troops, and then that's how the Imperial Guard is built. Just every planet gives a little so that every planet is protected. That's the idea.
Yeah.
This planet built its own individual private army because they were like, right, we're still having to give the tithes and everything like that, but what if we just get attacked? We have to wait for them to come back? That's nonsense. Like, you're not going to wait for reinforcements. Got to get attacked any minute. So they just got really paranoid. But at the same time as they were getting more and more paranoid and funneling more and more money into building all these crazy defenses, the Departmental Munitorum started demanding more troops and resources from the planet, which meant that they couldn't do what they were trying to do as much. And it basically, the two issues combined to push the chairman of the council to a breaking point. So he ended up getting kind of overwhelmed with his paranoia and the stress and everything like that. And in the year 443 of Millennia 40, so we're this whole thing starts up at 40k, right?
Yeah.
The chairman of the council declared martial law planet-wide and announced that Krieg was now independent from the Imperium.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he was like, we're not giving you our fucking soldiers anymore. So he refused the tithe, denounced the Emperor as his leader, and then said that the planet was no longer part of the Imperium, and they were just going to be on their own.
Oh, God.
So that was terrible.
Yeah, that's not a good day.
Yeah. And as you might expect, because it's the Imperial man, half the people are indoctrinated to hell. Half of the it kind of split up the populace. You ended up with like a civil war starting because some of the people were like, no, we want to stay with the Emperor and the Imperium. And some of them were like, no, this is exactly the right thing to do. We need to look after ourselves. We're working hard. We deserve what we work for, kind of thing. We shouldn't be shipping it off. Yeah. Which, I'll be honest with you, as I was writing my notes for this, I was like, God, this sounds like Brexit.
I'm sorry, Ryan. I couldn't help but think the same, but I didn't want to mention it.
Yeah, like, Krieg-xit, maybe? I don't know.
Krieg-xit. Krieg-xit.
Yeah, so civil war, or mass civil war, I should say. Mass civil war, because it was planet-wide, broke out, which was, you know, standard for 40k, I guess. And unfortunately, most of Krieg fell very quickly to the traitors, except for one hive city called Ferrograd. So Ferrograd stayed under loyalist control, and it was under the control of a man called Colonel Yurton, which is a cool name if you ask me.
Okay, I think it sounds a bit funny.
It does. Yeah, Colonel Yurton. So Colonel Yurton was in charge of the 83rd Krieg Imperial Guard Regiment, and when the Civil War broke out, the leaders of Ferrograd, the council and stuff that were, or whoever was diplomatically in charge of Ferrograd, were all kind of squabbling amongst themselves to see who would actually be in charge and what they were going to do and stuff. So Colonel Yurton just rocked up with his regiment of troops and took over in a military coup. Like, my city now, bitches.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was now an infamous military colonel who was obviously well respected because he was a colonel, and he was also very experienced. So he knew what he was doing with protecting the city, especially because the whole planet has spent the last God knows how many years sinking half of their money and stuff into defending all these cities and building up walls and everything and you know, armaments and everything. So these cities are heavily protected now, and you've got a military leader in charge of this one who's just like, right, I've got this, let's do this. So it became like a rallying point for all the loyalists left on Krieg. So people started flocking there just because it was the only safe place left to be. Unfortunately, the loyalists were massively outnumbered by the traitors, and soon Ferrograd was under siege and cut off from supplies. So days were numbered, right? They had to figure a way out of this situation. So Colonel Yurton calls to the Imperium for aid. He's like, look, we need reinforcements here. But when he did, and he asked for reinforcements, at the time, the orbital defenses for the planet were under the control of the traitors. And because they had put so much money and resources into building them, they were serious orbital defenses. And honestly, a massive fleet would have been required to break through just to provide reinforcements for one planet. The cost wasn't worth it. So the Imperium basically told me that's not gonna, like, basically told them, we're not sending a fleet. So he was like, well, what the hell do I do then? I can't, like, what do you want me to do? I need reinforcements. And basically the Imperium told him to win. Like, hold out, fight the enemy, punish them for turning on us, no matter the cost.
but I won't help.
Yeah, we
But do
won't
that.
help, but like you need to win on your own. So you know how you
Yes.
absolutely need reinforcements? Well, I'm telling you, you don't. So figure it out. And you're like, great, thank you. That's so helpful.
Oh,
Big help.
They have bad tech support. I'm not gonna lie.
They do. God, this honestly sounds like the response you get when you ask my boss for something. So, Yurtin made a decision, right, after being told no reinforcements were coming. He was like, all right, got one choice left. Krieg would belong to the Imperium or no one.
Oh,
Yeah.
That sort of okay. That's
Well, he was told
get what you
any
mean.
means necessary, no matter the cost. So he took that very literally.
yes.
So Yurtin, along with his ally from the Adeptus Mechanicus, Archmagos Greel, who was alongside him in Ferrograd, entered a secret underground storage facility under the city, which was Mechanicus tech, so they knew how it all worked and everything like that. I think they tipped him off about it, to be honest with you. And within those bunkers, do you want to guess what was in the secret underground bunkers?
What was in the underground bunkers?
Ancient atomic weaponry.
Oh, of course.
They were nuke
This is-
silos.
This is just World War. Like,
Yeah, it is. They literally just had a world war. That's all that happened. Yeah.
Oh.
So he goes into these bunkers and gets the nukes, the atom
Of
bombs,
course.
and decides we're gonna fire them on our own planet.
This'll do it.
Yeah.
This'll do the trick.
Yep. The thing is, he wasn't bombing the traitors so much as he predominantly launched the missiles into the stratosphere and then detonated them there, so that it engulfed the entire planet in nuclear vapor.
Yep.
Yep. So
And that is why they wear masks, right?
that is exactly why they wear masks. So
Yes.
nuclear fire burned across Krieg, and then a nuclear winter soon followed. Billions died, except for those who hid in underground bunkers, which, luckily, because it was Colonel Yurtin's idea to do this, he told all of his dudes to hide first. So
Ah.
basically all of the loyalists were hiding in underground bunkers perfectly safe, and none of the traitors knew this was going to happen, so most of them were caught unawares. Unfortunately, the Civil War continued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, they lost a massive number.
They did. It really turned the tide. But it now became like proper trench warfare.
Yeah.
So for 15 generations of Kriegsmen, the Loyalists slowly retook the planet, trench by trench, tunnel by tunnel, whatever means necessary.
Yeah.
And these troops that marched through the broken cities and radioactive vapor of the wastelands of Krieg, in great coats and vapor masks, they became known as the Death Korps of Krieg.
Yeah.
And after 500 years, Krieg was finally returned to the Imperium fully.
Nice.
Yeah. So they finally got brought back into the fold, officially by, what is it? The Munitorum's standards. They officially took them back in 500 years later. Right? And so the Imperial Guards taken from Krieg were now named the Death Korps of Krieg officially. So they weren't called like the Krieg Military Guard Regiment or anything like they used to be. They were all now officially known as the Death Korps of Krieg, as the Imperial man saw them, which is cool. And these troops had lived and died in a radioactive hellscape just to come back to the Imperium to do their duty. Like, they only fought that civil war so that they could rejoin the Imperium. They could have rolled over and died. They didn't have to do any of that. That's how committed they were. And they existed only to endure the hellish landscapes and kill in the name of the Emperor. So that's fun.
That's great.
Yeah. So now that they were officially back in, unfortunately, they hadn't provided any troops to the Departmentum Munitorum in over 500 years because they weren't able to provide for the tithe because they were in civil war. So the Munitorum decided that they owed them. They were in debt to the Munitorum as far as tithes were concerned.
But they weren't a part of it.
No,
Those 500 years.
not the ones that are alive. The ones that are alive were never the ones that renounced the Emperor. As far as Krieg was concerned, they were always fighting for the Emperor. It's just the traitors were now on their own planet this time, rather than some godforsaken other planet. And they weren't chaosy this time. So the Munitorum decides, you guys owe us, you're in debt. We need a tithe ASAP. Right? Now, the funny thing is, Krieg offered them troops when they were demanded. But it wasn't one regiment, it was 20. 20 full regiments of soldiers, suited, booted, armed, trained, and ready to fight.
But they don't have that, do they?
Yeah, they do.
Wait, they do?
Yeah. The Loyalist Krieg hadn't been, idle while they were fighting. Their soldiers were fighting on the front line. Do you know what all the civilians were doing? They were building. Because they were underground in these bunkers now, right? But Kriegsmen are incredible at siege warfare and trench warfare. They know how to dig, and they know how to do it well. So these dudes started excavating and building massive kilometers of tunnels and building massive underground cities and full factories under the destroyed planet's surface, all for the purpose of making and outfitting soldiers. So the whole time the war's been going on, they've been pumping out extra troops. While they're waiting for the paperwork to go through to get them back into the Imperium, more troops. This whole time, it's all they've been doing. Krieg now exists only to produce troops for the Imperium.
Well, that's great then.
Yeah. What is it? What's the term? I've seen people talk about it on Reddit before. What is it? The only thing a Kriegsman needs to know how to do is run, shoot, shovel, and die. So when they gave over these regiments, now the thing is, right, the Death Guard are always only Krieg troops. Other Imperial Guard regiments can be made up of scattered troops from random planets, right? If half the troops from one die and a third of the troops from another die, they'll merge them together and have a full unit again. So you'll end up from all over the place, right? Not the Death Korps. The Death Korps are only made up of native Kriegsmen, except for the Commissar, right? Because a Commissar is an officer whose job it is to keep the men in line, stop infighting, and keep morale up, keep an eye on these things, right? Stop people from defecting or running away or anything like that.
Yeah.
So the deal was, since you're new back to us and things like that, and we don't know what to expect from you guys, and we're treating you as a new body of this because you are the Death Korps now, not guardsmen, you do have to take a commissar from our officer groups into your regiments. Otherwise, we're not doing this. So every Kriegsman regiment that they handed over is given a commissar who is not a Kriegsman, right? It's because if you had them all be Kriegsmen, they would all share the same mentality and do things the same way. You have to have one that's, proper Imperium, just to make sure you're actually keeping them to the right rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were all given a commissar, and then they were sent out into the galaxy to fight the wars that the Imperium needed them to fight. They immediately proved to be massively more effective in environments that mimicked their home world than any other Imperial Guard troops were. So if you put them on a planet that had toxic atmosphere, these guys were at home. You put them on a radioactive hellscape, God, it's like being on holiday for these guys. It's like a staycation, right? They don't care how terrible the battlefield is. They actually fight better in it because it's what they're used to. It's what they know, which is excellent.
I mean, they have a massive advantage in that area because they're used to it.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Like you say.
But the thing is, when they handed over the 20 regiments, right, when they were first requested, the commanders of those regiments requested to be sent to the harshest battlefields the Imperium had to offer. So at the current day, Krieg provides the maximum number of regiments requested by the tithe, providing 10 regiments a year, as opposed to the 1 regiment expected of a planet of a similar size every decade. They literally give, I think it would be 100 times the troops that they were expected
that they expected to. Yeah.
Kriegsmen do not fuck around.
Oh, that's sick.
A Kriegsman is the only human that will ever charge a Chaos Marine with nothing but a shovel. They're also the only ones that might actually win that. I'll add
I was
that
about
in.
to say, yeah. They're also the only ones who could get away with it.
Yeah. All right, so that's the origin of these dudes. We're gonna get on to talk about the troops a little bit now, just the kind of the way they're ranked out. And this will give me a nice one compared to the usual, because I'm not having to scroll through fucking ranks upon ranks of monsters that take a million forms. Or there are Space Marines, and there are Magic Space Marines. That is it. This one has actual ones, which is great. I actually have a bunch of Kriegsmen sitting on my desk right now, because they were the first models I ever got.
Oh.
Yeah, they're cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, those troops do take a bunch of different forms, but it's kind of a standardized military form, which is good, because it makes it very clear-cut. But they're still very interesting, so we're going to run through it a little bit. So, the first you have is just your standard guardsman, right? This is your infantrymen, standard rifle in hand, march and shoot. And I would say that the Death Korps typical guardsman troops are just your typical guardsman troops. But there is a bit of a difference. They do specialize in hazardous environments, and they seem to love every minute of it. The Kriegsmen also boast incredible physical and mental resilience, which is probably just built up from having, lived the way they lived, and the mentality bred by their culture after that. And they are incredible at building trenches and defenses very quickly. For the record, the Death Guard?
Yeah.
Yeah, they would love these guys. Because the Death Guard like trenches too.
Oh, that's match made in heaven.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, Death Guard are Chaos Marines at the moment, so... yeah. I would
not a match made in heaven.
I would like to see like a CGI thing of them fighting each other, and it's basically just like one guy pops up out of a trench and then fires and then ducks back down. Just keep doing that. Just on each side. Eventually, all the Kriegsmen just charge with shovels.
We could make that,
I'll be honest with you, that's not what would happen, as you will see as we go through this.
Oh, God.
There are other types of troops that fill in the gaps that leaves. So, interesting thing about these guys, right? Kriegsmen have great hand-to-hand skills, way beyond what an ordinary guardsman would ever have, because bayonet training starts as a child.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're breeding them.
Yes, aye.
Kind of breeding them for war.
Yeah, aye. But they honestly, like, from the day they're born, like, here's a knife. Stab.
We're starting slow. Here's a knife when you're born.
Also, interestingly, right? So typically with guardsmen, right? With soldiers in general, right? You teach firing discipline and aiming in equal measure, probably tipped more towards aiming, I would say, slightly, right? Because you don't want to waste shots. You want to make sure you take down targets, right? Kriegsmen are a whole other side of the scale. Those guys are trained specifically for firing discipline, and aim is a secondary characteristic of that, right? Like,
what?
Yeah, which is really interesting, right? Because the idea is you need to be able to march and fire in time with the guys alongside you, right? Because it doesn't matter if 3 of you miss if the other 55 hit.
Huh.
Right? Like, you're going to be able to aim vaguely. We don't need you to be able to shoot the wings off a fly from 4 million miles away, right? We need you to be able to shoot the guy that's running towards you, and we need you to do it right. Right? We don't care where you hit him. The 3 guys to your left and right are also going to hit him. He's going to die. We just need you to fire in time and quickly while marching.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like quantity over quality,
Yeah, that's very much their firing style.
Yes, because if it works, it works,
I don't
works.
care. It's the thing with trench warfare, right? If you take the time to aim while you're doing trench warfare, it's a 50-50 shot their sniper gets you first.
Yeah.
Right? It's more important to be able to get a vaguely accurate shot off quick than it is to be able to, take the time to aim properly. If you could do this, like, an incredibly accurate shot and take the head off a guy from another trench at the same speed, excellent. You'll be the favorite guy in the regiment. But in reality, if we just have 40 of you that can pop up, take an almost on target shot, and then duck back down, you'll still kill him. He'll still die. Someone will get him. You know what I mean? So also, if you are marching from trench to trench, you need to be able to suppress the enemies because you're in open ground.
Yeah.
And they're not. So firing discipline is the key to that. Everyone needs to fire in time perfectly, or they're going to find the opening and take you down. So, interesting feature of them that I really like is just that part.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
It is very cool, but otherwise, they are your standard infantrymen. The next one's really fun, right? The next one is called a Death Rider.
Ooh.
They are the Death Korps' answer to cavalrymen. They ride bioengineered horses into combat.
Please tell me you have a picture of that.
I do!
Oh my god, thank god.
The funny thing is, they just look like a horse, but it's kind of scarred up because it's had surgery.
Wait, what the?
Yeah, it's literally like a World War I soldier with a lance on a horse. Like, why is he here? You know, actually, he's one of the most dangerous guys on the battlefield. So the horses are bioengineered in the sense that they have extra organs added in to make them able to survive all the same environments the Kriegsmen do.
Yeah, their feet especially, or their hooves are very, very different. It looks like a griff or
A griffin.
something like that. A griffin, sorry.
Yeah, they've got mad feet. And they're also gigantic. But
yeah, I can see.
These horses are tanks, and they can survive in like radioactive situations or toxic vapor or whatever. So imagine you're in some like crazy radioactive hellscape, and you're like walking through a crazy swamp of fog, and you're just like, right, okay, I'm fine. I've got my power suit on. It's filters. I'll be fine. Like if you're like a death guard or something, and you're just marching along, and then the next like a horse piles out of the fog, impales you, and blows your chest out. Like, what in the fuck? It'd be terrifying. Like, although I now know where the Mechanicum get the horse masks that some of them wear.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we actually came across that in previous episodes.
I think I made a joke about it in the Mechanicum episode. I think this is how they get them.
Yeah, you did. You was like, where did they even get a horse? Well,
Yeah.
Ryan, here's the answer.
Here's the answer. So the horses have their extra organs for surviving situations, and so I wonder if normal horses see these horses as like a Primarch horse, or are these like the Space Marines of horses to other horses? I'm curious. Weaponry wise, these guys, they typically have like the usual sidearms, so your pistols or your las pistols and stuff like that, or a plasma pistol, possibly. They carry a saber, so they actually have a cavalryman sword. And they also have a lance that has explosive tip.
Oh, God.
So the idea is you charge towards a Space Marine, impale him, and blast him from the inside out with a spear.
But how are you going to survive that yourself?
Well, it's only the tip of it explodes. The idea is to have it buried in someone's chest when it goes off.
Oh, I mean, it's still a dangerous
Also,
job.
you're on a horse. I think you impale them and keep going and leave it behind.
I mean, oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of strategies that come with it that are, I think once you're doing it, become quite obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they do also have, like, armor. Also, the horse has armor on, like, on his head, so...
Yeah, I reckon you'd be okay. I think the hardest part would not be getting hit with shrapnel from the blown up Space Marine. But I think if you run past him, he'll get blasted out the other way, so you'll probably be alright.
Yeah.
You just don't want to be in hand-to-hand combat with a Space Marine when someone comes over and impales him.
Oh, no.
That would be a bad
that's
situation.
That's a bad day.
Yeah.
But now this is not their first rodeo. So
Yeah.
It's...
I think these guys probably act as like a vanguard troop. They're probably typically on their own or in banks of them. Like, of Death Riders.
Yeah, like a small group that, can...
charge ahead and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To throw off enemy movements and stuff. So the next troop we're going to talk about is the Commissars, who, as we said, are the only non-native Kriegsmen allowed within Kriegsmen platoons or regiments. So the Commissar's job is usually to maintain morale and handle like insurrection amongst the regiments. The Death Korps Commissars usually find themselves trying to stop the overzealous troops from running in too quickly and getting themselves killed.
Okay.
Death Guard are just way too happy to charge someone with a shovel. Okay?
It sounds like that.
Like, the shovel is the only thing they ever need. They can dig, they can murder. What more do you need? But I'm going to be honest with you, like, way too many of them are way too happy to just run in, dick first with a shovel in hand, and get gunned down.
Why does this sound like the orcs?
It honestly kind of is. And they do quite well fighting orcs, actually. They're quite well suited to fighting orcs. Because most guardsmen are scared of orcs. Yeah. Which is understandable. But Kriegsmen aren't. That's for damn sure. The next one's quite fun. The Quartermaster is a fun rank, right? These are a unique troop just to the Kriegsmen because it replaces their battlefield medics. The Kriegsmen do not have battlefield medics. They have Quartermasters instead, right? So the Quartermaster is a troop that has been given medical and some tech training, right? But they have other duties that are their main duties, right? So back during the Civil War, they obviously had battlefield medics, right? But battlefield medics had very little use in that Civil War because any troop who couldn't either retreat on their own or be patched up rapidly to immediately be returned to fighting condition was only a liability. You couldn't be carrying someone back, you'll just get shot, right? But their equipment was much more valuable than trying to carry back a injured soldier. So the people that would have been medics, rapidly their situation changed from trying to like triage someone in a battlefield so that 3 weeks from then they might be able to hold a gun again to, look mate, you're not gonna make it out of here, I'll execute you so that, you know, like give you peace finally, and I'll recover your equipment. So
well, I like, you're done for, but I could use your gun, you know, or your weapon.
Well, that's the thing, right? You got to keep in mind that the predominant part of the Civil War took place with Ferrograd, one city of loyalists, and the rest of the planet as traitors. So once the city was cut off from supply lines, they couldn't produce more equipment, but they had more men and women and children and stuff that they needed to protect. They had more people that could fight, but they didn't have equipment for them because they couldn't make more. So getting the equipment back meant they could have a soldier back on the lines the same day, whereas getting an injured guy back doesn't do that. It gets you a sick guy you've now got to feed when you don't have food.
Yeah.
So the medics turned into quartermasters, and their job was predominantly execute people before they bleed out or succumb to radiation poisoning or whatever, and recover their shit.
Yeah, retrieve the valuable stuff.
Yeah, that's how it worked out. So now their quote-unquote medics are just called quartermasters.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. It's like a very cold-hearted strategy, but I mean, in battle and war, it does make sense, you know?
I think once you get to nuclear war, cold-hearted is the way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, if I was the one down bad, right, I would probably just prefer to, like, being laid to rest immediately.
I think it was a bullet to the head, but I mean, yeah, that's at least it's fast.
Yeah.
Also, I sent you a picture of a commissar at the bottom, and the one above it is the quartermaster stroke medic. Fun times.
Yeah, his guts is out, but I can still use his stuff.
Yeah, that's it. I need to cut this uniform off him.
Yeah.
Ooh, grenades. So the next trooper I'm going to talk about are the Grenadiers, which I like saying that word. It's just a good word.
It's a funny word. The Grenadiers.
So the Grenadiers are seen as like an elite troop. They're taken from the normal infantrymen. Once you become like a veteran or kind of survive unsurmountable odds or something like that. Once you're kind of highlighted as being kind of better than the other guys around you in some way or another, you'll get told you're becoming a Grenadier, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, 8 out of 10 Grenadiers die, right?
Okay.
They are KIA. So it's basically a death sentence. But it's not a job offer you can refuse because it's seen as part of your duty. So they have to accept it.
Yeah.
So they kind of take it quite sullenly, but I'll be honest with you, Kriegsmen are quite sullen in general, so who would notice? Oh, they also wear a skull mask all the time, which is quite cool. So when they accept the job, they put on the skull mask and kind of just accept that is life now.
Yeah.
Which is not great, but, such is life. So they act as like an infantry support using heavy weapons. So these are the guys that'll break out like the flamethrowers and the rocket launchers and the las cannons and stuff like that for taking out tanks and stuff.
And LMGs, like
probably like mounted ones and stuff like that. That's these guys. But I think because that makes you a higher target, because that's immediately more dangerous, you're much more likely to just get murdered.
Yeah.
Not great, but such is life. And then we have the engineers, right? Mm-hmm. I like the engineers. Engineers are an odd one. They are similar to the grenadiers in that they are a support role for the main infantry, but they are experts in subterranean warfare.
Okay.
So these guys dig tunnels and saps under the battlefield to the enemy side, and they'll either like dig out under like structural areas so that they can blast the ground out from under like their supports of their building so it collapses on them, or so that they can dig up and like they'll dig right under the ground and
infiltrate them.
Yeah, they like they use a small blasting charge to open the last part of the tunnel, and then they'll just surge out and start gunning people down.
Oh, that's sick.
That's a great strategy. They did it in the wars. They would dig from like one trench under the other, and then come up on the other side of no man's land and just start wiping people out. It's a solid strategy. That's what a sap is. Solid strategy. Also, interestingly, these guys are allowed to use chemical warfare. They're like the engineers are authorized for chemical warfare, so they carry small gas grenades on them that has like corrosive gas inside it that they can use as like a last resort.
Damn.
Yeah, wouldn't work against Nurgle. His guys are pretty rusty in general.
Yeah, they would probably like it.
Probably. Yeah. Oh god, yeah, that's horrible. Oh. Interestingly, I feel like corrosive gas would work better against loyalists than it would against the traitors.
Yeah.
Traitors are pretty corroded in general, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes up the bulk of their troops. They do have a couple extra ones, and they do have tanks and stuff, but we're not gonna get into those at the moment. We'll deep dive on this stuff later. As far as kind of notable stuff around these guys, we have so there's a bunch of campaigns that they were involved in, like actual wars that they were a big part of and stuff like that. But there's one in specific I want to tell you about because it's hilarious. So it's called the Siege of Durandi. No, Durandi. Sorry, Durandi. So Durandi was a hive world, very similar to how Krieg was. Which went into open rebellion in 936 of M41, right? So this is like 1,000 years, about 1,000 years after Krieg went Civil War style. So once they went into open rebellion, the Administratum started sending officials to go and check it out and be like, what the hell's going on? Like, what's happening? And basically, angry mobs hung every one of them.
No.
Yeah. So the Death Korps were deployed to handle the situation. They deployed into the mountains that overlooked the primary hive city and began to unleash artillery fire.
Oh.
They shelled this city for 5 years. Just 5 years of non-stop artillery bombing, right?
That's... Yeah.
After the 5 years, the rebels offered an unconditional surrender.
I mean, yes, of course.
Right? To which the Kriegsmen basically went, noted, and ignored, and then continued to shell for another 3 years until all signs of life in the hive had ceased. And once they confirmed that all signs of life had ceased, they then continued shelling for another 2 years.
Why?
Just to make sure.
That's That's very gruesome, you know.
Yeah, Kriegsmen do not fuck around.
That's insane. That's like, you know, I shot a guy. I know he's dead, but I'm still gonna continue shooting, you know, just in case. But
Double tap, man. It's important.
Not just double tap, Ryan. That's just overkill.
This is decimation.
That's just wrong. That's what it is.
Yeah, but it's a funny story though. It really shows the Kriegsman's attitude, you know.
I mean, I guess.
Sir, all signs of life have faded. Keep going. Are there still bugs? There can't be any bugs. So I can still see smoldering ash. Get rid of it.
Not even body parts laying around anymore. Like just ashes. There's still ashes burning. You know.
Get the giant leaf blower. We need to get rid of these ashes.
Oh God.
Yeah. So as far as like notable units for this stuff goes, right, there isn't a lot of individual Kriegsmen that have like huge backstories and stuff like there is for most factions.
Yeah.
Because they're relatively new in terms of like in world time, right? Because the stuff that's going on is happening around the year 41,000 to 42,000, right? That's the majority of the current storyline is going on at that kind of latter section there, right? And the Kriegsmen have been around since since 40,000 ish, right? So they haven't actually had a lot of time to do very much. The fact that they've been involved in a lot of major campaigns already is incredible. But what it means is that not a lot of individual characters have came out of it with their own big storyline. The other side of that is that humans, especially, but also guardsmen, typically don't live very long in 40k. So it would be very rare to have a bunch of them that have only been around for like 2,000 years or 1,000 years to have big crazy storylines behind them. You know what I mean? It's just, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to kind of flesh out some more individual characters with unique storylines that are really interesting. But there is a few. There is a handful that have kind of cool storylines. Colonel Yurton, obviously, we talked about him. He was the one that nuked the hell out of Krieg in the first place.
Yeah. Yep.
He's a cool guy. So he obviously is one of the notable ones that is an individual guy with his own storyline. But I found another one that I kind of want to tell you about a little bit. So this storyline is going to sound familiar because it happens a lot, right? This is a dude called Karis Venner, right? He was Marshal of the 17th Line Corps of the Death Korps, right?
Yeah.
This man was declared KIA 3 times and just kept coming back.
No. Oh no, this sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. That storyline comes up a lot. People just don't die very well in 40k. No. It's weird. 40k is a weird like contrast of everyone dies no matter what, and some people don't die no matter what. It's weird. So he was once announced KIA, and then 3 days later, he was found leading a battered and beaten squad of Death Korps troops, surrounded by, and I quote, a sea of corpses. Him and like 20 random soldiers just murdered everyone that came at them like it was like Left 4 Dead horde defense.
Call of Duty Zombies.
That's it. He was just playing Call of Duty Zombies by the end of that. Interesting fact about him: his voice is raspy as all hell because he was once doused by an enemy flamer. So he was doused by a flamethrower, and it destroyed his lungs and trachea.
And he's still standing.
Yeah, I assume he got some kind of like artificial stuff added in, some kind of, you know, fixing surgery from like Mechanicum or something like that.
Yeah,
I assume.
And that's besides the fact that he was like killed in action. You know what's called.
That was probably like the one time he wasn't KIA, and the guy who usually reports that saw him and was like, "For the love of God, will you just die?" There's a thing, right? So he was he's like a prevalent character within the Orphean War, or the Orpheus War, or however you want to call it, which was a campaign of the Imperium versus the Necron, in which he led literally millions of Kriegsmen into combat, and eventually, seemingly, was killed during a suicidal mission to destroy a Necron monolith. So, as it stands, I believe he's supposed to be dead because he led a suicide mission. But given
yeah.
that he is who he is, he's probably going to turn up.
Yeah.
I reckon it's just a matter of time until he rocks up somewhere.
Oh my god, they killed Kenny.
You could do that about like 46 people at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the Death Korps of Krieg.
Oh.
Yeah. There isn't much more to go into it without it becoming a deep dive. And I think we're going to have a season that's just going to be called Deep Dives, and we're just going to pick random topics we've covered before and go into them in much more detail.
Yeah, I would like that. Some
yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's us. Unless you have any questions. Have any questions?
No, I was just going to mention that I think these guys sounds cool, especially because like it's something that in terms of warfare and these guys, you feel like you've seen it before in history books with like the World War, like it's based off World War One.
Yeah,
that kind of thing, and it just makes you think. I don't know. I think it's cool. I think it's cool.
The thing is, most things within Warhammer are taken from real world inspiration, right?
Yes.
So, for example, Warhammer Fantasy is an easier one to give examples with, right? So, in Warhammer Fantasy, it is all based on one planet, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at a map of Warhammer Fantasy, the map looks disturbingly similar to our world map.
Like in real life?
Yes, right? Yeah, and then if you look at all the different cultures, if you go out east, you find all the cultures that are like very obviously based on Eastern cultures. So there's a culture that is very obviously based on China. There's ones that are obviously based on like Mongolia. Then you've got like Britonia, which is obviously based on Britain, but it's like Arthurian legend, like King Arthur and all that.
Yeah,
the whole culture is based entirely on Arthurian legend. Stuff like that. There's like every culture and stuff like that. You can see where they took it from, and it's much easier to see it in that. The Primarchs and the Legions in 40k do show it quite well as well, because if you look at a lot of them, they're very obviously a particular type of culture. So Jagatai Khan is obviously based on the Mongol hordes, right? The Mongolian hordes, right? That was their entire gimmick. Before they became Space Marines, they rode around on horses shooting people with bows, right? They were literally Mongol hordes before they became Space Marines. But there's an explanation for it, and it's because the Emperor sampled genetics from all of humanity as well as his own to make them, which is why they're all different rather than just being based on him, because they all take aspects from humanity. But some of them are very, very tilted towards a particular culture, whereas some of them are quite generic in a sense, I guess. So yeah, Jagatai Khan and the White Scars are based on Mongolians and their history, and then you've got like the Space Wolves that are based on the Netherlands and Denmark and stuff like that. They're Norse. That's their entire thing. Stuff like that. So there's a lot of like semi-similar stuff, and there's a lot of very on-the-nose similar stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, they weren't overly creative when they came up with a lot of this stuff. It's not too far apart. More so for fantasy, though, because they took fantasy and then put it in space to make 40k. So with fantasy, it's a lot more on the nose, and with 40k, it's a bit more kind of separated and developed.
Yeah, it's a bit more creative.
In a sense, yeah, aye. But I guess it's just like hindsight is 2020 kind of thing, We've done this before, now we can do a bit more with it because we know what we're doing. Yeah. I guess is the way it works.
All right. Well, I think that's it for us for this one. Thank you guys for listening. It's been me, Mess, and Ryan, and we will see you in the next one. Take care, and peace.
Bye.